Cara.
No way. Jeez, I do this every time. I should make a list of this. Start of every day.
Something's wrong with you.
Only something. Okay.
All right. Good. So a couple of things I want to bring. I'm not sure which one to bring first, but let me do it this way. By 1818, there was a fellow in the United States teaching education at Harvard. Okay. His name was Alexander Inglis. He was a professor, I assume a PhD. And the book was called Principles of Secondary Education. There are 6 basic functions of the school, according to this fellow. So I'll read you the function, and then I will embellish or explain. Not embellish, explain. 1, the adjustive or adaptive function. Schools are to establish fixed habits of reaction to authority. This, of course, precludes critical judgment completely. It also pretty much destroys the idea that useful or interesting material should be taught, because you can't text for reflexive obedience until you know whether you can make kids learn and do foolish and boring things. 2, the integrating function, also known as conformity. This might as well be called the conformity function because its intention is to make children as alike as possible. People who conform are predictable, and this is of great use to those who wish to harness and manipulate a large labor force. 3, the diagnostic and directive function. School is meant to determine each student's proper social role, and I will get back to that in a minute. This is done by logging evidence mathematically and anecdotally on cumulative records as in your permanent record, and yes, you do have one. I believe that's the case in the UK as well. 4, the differentiating function, also known as sorting. We'll come back to this too. Once their social role has been diagnosed, children are to be sorted by role and trained only so far as their destination in the social machine merits, and not one step further. 5, the selective function. It's also the hygienic function. This refers not to human choice at all, but to Darwin's theory of natural selection as applied to what he called the favored races. In short, the idea is to help things along by consciously attempting to improve the breeding stock. Schools are meant to tag the unfit with poor grades, remedial placement, and other punishments, clearly enough that their peers will accept them as inferior and effectively bar them from the reproductive sweepstakes. That's what all those little humiliations from first grade onward were intended to do.
That hasn't been very successful because, I mean, if anything, the unwashed masses are reproducing much, much faster at a much higher rate than the so-called elitist.
There are things that aren't very useful, and that may be part of what chemtrails are about, because we are being sterilized as well. Okay, so anyway, one more function, quickly.
I think just briefly, they're now talking about women not being able to give birth properly. In the next generation of children won't be able to give birth.
I think that's true. I think we're seeing that absolutely. 6, the propedeutic function. The societal system implied by these rules will require an elite group of caretakers. See, there's that 5%, 95% again. To that end, a small fraction of the kids will quietly be taught how to manage this continuing project, how to watch over and control a population deliberately dumbed down and declawed in order that government might proceed unchallenged and corporations might never want for obedient labor. 1818, professor of education at Harvard University, the 6 functions of school. That should horrify anybody.
That's 200 years ago?
Yeah. It's been in place about that long. And then remember, we were talking about the Board of Education and how Horace Mann sort of invented the very first one, to my knowledge. Well, the Rockefeller and Ford invented one too in Texas to figure out how to make use of what they saw as an amazing application of social engineering in the schools. And one of the things they were keeping an eye on was this Professor Thorndike, I think his name was, and he coined the phrase ed-psych. He was a psychological education specialist at the University of Texas. Rockefeller and his cohorts made this and Ford made this Board of Education, and they actually made themselves a little mission statement. Can I read it?
Yeah.
1906, yeah? First paragraph. In our dreams, people yield themselves with perfect docility to our molding hands. The present education conventions of intellectual and character education fade from their minds, and unhampered by tradition, we work our own will upon a grateful and responsive folk. We shall not try to make these people or any of their children into philosophers or men of learning or men of science. We have not to raise up from them authors, educators, poets, men of letters. We shall not search for artists, painters, musicians, lawyers, doctors, preachers, politicians, statesmen, of which we have an ample supply. The task is simple. We shall organize children and teach them in a perfect way the things their fathers and mothers are doing in an imperfect way. That is, that was their mission statement. It's the technology we become, and I think that I came across this statement when I was reading just in the last few days about how we used China, post-revolutionary China, as a laboratory, that these are laboratories for exploring the technology of subjugation.
So that would make the communist revolution in China part of the New World Order agenda.
You better believe it. Every revolution. I'm not sure about the American Revolution. That there's lots of debate going on about that because, of course, there were so many Masons involved at the very beginning, and we're not really sure who was.
Yeah, well, the three
behind
revolutions happened. It was the French Revolution, the so-called Irish Revolution, the 1690 rebellion, Orange Rebellion.
See, we don't know about that in the States.
And this all connects
We're so not
in
allowed
terms
to know.
of a matrix control, because the late Andrew Power, which I keep referring to, made a study of the 1690 battle. And it wasn't a battle, it was a ritual to program the Irish into a bipolar conflict situation.
Does Mark Passio talk about that? Do you know who I mean?
I don't know.
Okay.
The only other person who Michael Tessarian.
Yes, Tessarian.
He borrowed from Andrew Power's book.
Yeah.
That basic concept.
Yeah, that wasn't really a battle. It was
It wasn't
a ritual.
a battle, it was a ritual between a prince and a king.
Yeah.
And the Battle of the Boyne symbolizing crossing the universe or the galaxy.
Yeah.
So you have a predator which crosses the universe to come here, and of course the battle of where the Boyne Valley is where New Grange and these ancient monuments and and also the Holy Grail. There's been Israeli scientists working there to try and find and dig things up and all sorts of things.
What is that? Isn't that just Sophia? Isn't that this planet, the Holy Grail? Ultimately.
Now, I haven't heard the term Sophia before. I've heard of Gaia, but
you need John
explain
Lamb
that.
Lash. John Lamb Lash is his name. He's done a lot of work on that. I can never remember the entire title of his book, but it starts not in his name. So John Lamb Lash, not in his name, and then the rest of the title. But it's a fabulous book, and he talks about the true mission of the entity that is Sophia, and we're on how our mission on this planet, which I can't ever get away from. I can't stress.
That's Mother Nature.
That too, yeah.
Which is why the
all these
predator
names
is
for it.
attacking all the energetic lines and energies of Mother Nature to destroy.
Yeah, speaking of attacks on the sacred feminine, which is something that, that's something that the Tavistock took in hand by primarily by getting mothers out of homes and out into the workforce, and convincing them that raising their children was the most denigrating thing that they could possibly do. I read an interesting factoid about Prussia, or came across an interesting factoid, and that was that this was a country, a synthetic state, if you will, who around before 1800, by 1776, because I guess that's an important date, by 1776 required all the women in the country of Prussia to register the onset of their monthly menses with the police. I know, it sort of takes your breath
That
away, doesn't
must
it?
be a. There must be an energetic. That screams to me some kind of dimensional issue, a non-Terran reason for that.
Prussia. I think we all need to know about Prussia. Don't you?
Yes.
Yes.
But speeding on to the 20th century,
Yes,
and
let's do
then this is where the so-called dimensional gates, the great Maria Ortiz and the channeling and all this stuff.
This is your purview, not mine.
Yeah.
At least
But
not
it's the
consciously
same
right
region.
now. Yeah.
The synthetic beings that are being created here, not too far away from here, Germany everything leads back to Germany, and
Yeah,
certain houses and grand places in Prussia.
Yeah, we have to get straight on that, I think.
Prussia, East Germany. That's where my father went before the war.
Yeah.
It's amazing. My father went to many places, and everywhere he went, there was a revolution afterwards.
Interesting.
A war, or
Oh, we need to
But
get
anyway,
to know Miles.
I used to
think.
slag him off. Everywhere you been?
Well,
a few
I
years
think-
later, there was a bloody war.
I think we need to straighten this out. We need to get straight on Germany, because that was always a question for me as well. My forebears are lots of different things, but my forebears have been in the United States on one side since 1700. Okay, but a large part of my background is German. My physical background this time around is German, and so it has been a question for me all of the time for as long as I've been cognizant. Why is it always Germany? Why? You can go to the Tavistock Institute and realize that that those wars were manufactured, and civilization or populations were turned on each other that had absolutely no quarrel with each other, and that they were all engineered. They were blood sacrifices. They were ways to make demonic sums of money. It's a package. It's a recipe that's been enacted on us over and over and over.
The British royal family, German.
The British royal family, are German, yes. In terms of who are we really talking about, though, I think it's really important. Are we talking about the synthetic entity that is Prussia, which was the Teutonic Knights, who gathered up 171 fractured German principalities and made them a thing? What are we talking about? Because we were talking about the folk souls as well, remember? Yeah. This is important. The folk souls are something that, for example, one of the best 20th century illustrations of the folk soul and how indelible it is and indefeatable it is the EU. All right? I was horrified.
I had a thought there that one of the crucial things about the Germanic tribes was that they weren't Romanized. The Roman Empire.
No, they were not.
So that's very important. And I think there must be.
They weren't
Romanized. Be some
Romanized.
and then also the Vikings and how they fought back.
But they were captured, yes. They weren't Romanized, but they were captured by these Teutonic Knights, whoever they in the end turn out to be. They were Templars. They were commissioned by the original Templars in Israel. I think they were Germanic. But we always have to be careful what it is that we're talking about exactly. These lump sums, these redefinitions of language, to confuse us.
Very, very much so.
Yeah, let's not talk. Let's make sure that we're very clear about what we're talking about. I have people. I have people who I trust very much esoterically, who've told me there is a ninth beatitude, and that it has to do with Germany.
Now explain that again.
That's as far as I can go. I have somebody, as a matter of fact, my partner in this book, Harold Kautzvella, knows about this. One of these days we're going to get him over here so you can interview him, because he's fascinating, terrific. He's a physicist, he's a German Israeli, and he's a physicist, a geologist, and deeply, deeply esoteric. And he's written the second half of this book, which is an expansion on his talk at the Open Mind Conference in Oslo in 2012. And he talks about the effects, and it's very readable. You shouldn't be put off by the chemistry in the book, but he talks about the effects of what's coming down in the sky on farmers in Norway wanted things evaluated. And so he had to look at these things in a very clean way, in a way that's not open to being torn apart scientifically. And so that's valuable because there are people.
Yes.
Yeah.
You've
Anyway,
got,
he's the one.
Hard data that you can
Hard
actually,
data. But he's also the one who talks about John Dee's connection to chemtrailing and the demonic connection to
John
chemtrailing.
Dee?
Yeah.
Shakespeare.
Yeah, we got to get Harold in on this conversation, yeah?
This is why Simon
I can't
smiled
speak
the other.
for him.
Yeah.
I can't speak for him, but I can say that he's the one who handles the truly demonic aspects of chemtrailing and Morgellons disease, and he's also the one who knows, between the two of us, he knows more about certainly sentient oil. The only one who seems to know more or seemed to have more facts at his disposal was Griffin, in my opinion, but Harold knows a lot about it firsthand. He's done a lot of research with this, and he has antidotes to the effects of the sentient oil that he uses.
Now that's important because
It
the
is
sentient
important,
oil's
yes.
some issues that it's here to reset life, to remove this anomalous predatory error.
Yeah. Yeah, he has been with people in Germany who have managed to bring together ways to defeat the effects of Morgellons, and he also has managed to be part of an effort to neutralize the effects of sentient oil successfully. He will say successfully. Now, I cannot speak for him. I can say that this is Harold's.
The logic to sentient oil is it's been in crude oil. We've been burning it in our gasoline engines
natural,
for the last 100 years plus. Therefore, it must have its particulates must be in the air, and so everything on the planet must have breathed it in by now. It
Well, he
must
says there's two
must
kinds
be part
as
of,
well.
Yeah.
And you've said this before too, have you not? There are two kinds. It's like sacred water and the other kind.
Yeah, that Marie Whitley would
Yeah.
with sacred water being deep.
There's a deep sentient oil, and then there's a sentient oil that's more of an AI, yeah? Or is it the other way around?
I suggest that there's not enough known about it to get a definitive answer as to whether we're talking about one thing or maybe different versions of it or different aspects of it. Von Neumann referred to grey goo and referred that as sentient.
I will say,
as an artificial intelligence.
I will make
nanotech.
sure that you have access to Harold. He's the one. He translated The Sun Thief for me. Number one, that's how I met him. And then he and I decided to do this book together after we spoke on a panel together. But when I first met him and he started to translate The Sun Thief, he told me that there was actually a 9th beatitude that was very specific about Germany's. See, I'm going to get on 18 lists by saying this, but Germany has a destiny. Right, here we go. And that beatitude has been eliminated from Bibles. Now, I can't tell you any more than that. He could give you all the details, I suppose, of how he knows that.
I mean, this is the Aryan.
I know.
The thing about the
I just
Aryan,
made all the lists.
No, but
didn't I?
the Aryan thing goes back to Ireland. That the Aryans were that's where the Irish comes from. Irish comes from.
Right. This is Passio.
It's those who had the high knowledge from the last catastrophe. Those who survived, and that's another reason why anybody who had the high knowledge had to be taken out by whatever this predator is.
Yes, but these are the kinds of things that you have to entertain if you want to. And we really do also have to think, not react, please, but think, and not just with our heads either, with our heart minds. Why Germany? Why that bit of the world every time right now? There has to be a reason. And I don't buy that it's because they're all psychotic, that's what the Tavistock and the Frankfurt School have. Well, it's really the Tavistock. Tavistock's the war machine, but that is the recipe they've given us, that we're forced down our throats, that we're forced to believe.
Well, exactly. I mean, what you just referred to there is exactly. Again, I keep going back to Ireland. That's why the Irish, the high knowledge people who had the ancient knowledge, either it's in their DNA or what it is, they had to be diverted and put into a conflict situation, so they would never think.
Exactly. This is about a destiny denied, and so is Ireland. You're saying the same thing. This is about a destiny denied, and frankly, that is an esoteric crime of the highest order, in my opinion. All right? It's one thing to physically end a life. That's a crime, and it's an esoteric crime, absolutely. But I think, too, it's, in esoteric circles, it is considered to be an even higher crime to stop someone in their tracks, keep them here on the planet. Caspar Hauser was a really good example of this, and just not let them fulfill their destiny. That can happen with countries as well, and I think that's definitely happened with Ireland, with the Hibernian, destiny. I would call it the Hibernian destiny.
Yes, the term Ireland's too emotive, and it's actually a later term. It wasn't called Ireland until much later.
Because you go back to things like the Hibernian mystery schools. This is a big thing. This is a real, solid earth blood gesture. All right, and the same thing has happened to Germany in the 20th century. You can't think of what was there prior to World War I in terms of just the heart and the philosophy and the gesture and the folk soul and all of those things, and just assume that somehow they turned into demons and became, it's not. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. We have to stop reacting when we're talking about these things. Yes. Yeah.
And a lot of our language is programmed, even with the Jews, and they're victims of what they're being put through by their own leaders.
We're all victims.
We're all victims, but the idea is not to be a victim. The idea is to be positive and think and work through the problem and push a wonderful world and a planet and groups of civilizations to a more positive.
And now let's talk about the folk soul a bit too, because this, to me, if I had a visual, it would be sort of like a patchwork quilt in a way that goes around the planet, and I'm not saying that that's actually what it is. I'm just saying that I'm trying to get a visual in place. But we come here in any incarnation, and we land in a certain culture, very much on purpose. So our individual purpose is wrapped up in the purpose of the culture in which we live. It's that symbiotic relationship, and we are imbued into our very bones with the folk soul of the culture that we are born into. That is a template, if you will. I don't like the word template. I'd like to study at some point the connection between the word template and Templar. However, I prefer a German word. It's called Ur, U-R. And for me, Ur is the very basic, original prototype of anything. The Ur soul of a country can be described in words, I suppose, as its folk soul. And that Ur, because it's a template, lives in the morphogenic field. And so that is why it's very difficult to get to. But garbage in, garbage out. You can try. I think they're trying.
But by accessing our thoughts, our inner consciousness, before we bring them to this domain, we can then access and change this domain, or whatever is accessing deep within the soul of our thoughts.
We can, and we should, and it's that easy. But we're so bold, we're so blown over, like these clowns that you blow up with air, and they're just constantly whack, 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 keeping us off balance, all the time. Distraction. I call it the here kitty, 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 kitty syndrome. Look around you. It's everything. Their entire will is bent toward making sure you can't stop and think. You can't stop and know who you are. You can't get any quiet. You can't get inside yourself. All right? Now, you can wake up. And many, many, many people are waking up. and then you have some protection. You notice immediately that you have some protection, and the longer you're awake, the more you notice that, you know, when something's obviously coming at you to distract you, and specifically at you. There's general stuff that I've gotten out of my life years ago. Turn off that TV, that kind of stuff. And then there's stuff that's specifically aimed at you. And if you really start speaking out, they turn the heat up on you just as you're getting ready to, you know, to say something important to someone on film. I mean, getting to this interview, in the end, I had to start laughing because it was like, oh, come on. I'm going to go talk. Get off my back, right? Because it was just thing after thing after thing after thing.
Well, I just think reversing down the slip road of the...
Oh, what do you say? Yeah, okay. So, and when I talked to you Friday about, do you remember the books, the collections of my mother's work coming out of nowhere on Friday? That was my mom, actually. She wants me to say this on camera, by the way. I have to. Otherwise, I wouldn't know about it, because it really means nothing to me personally. Yeah. But the years that she worked for the Office of Naval Research were 1989, 1990, and 1991. There were editors of the fact sheet prior to her. There were not after her. They eliminated that position, so she was the last one. All right? Now, when I first started to research the Sun Thief, I looked to see if any of the fact sheets were online. Some of them were, just a couple. And most of them were still classified. You could see parts of them, but not. So I thought, well, that's a dead end.
They were redacted.
That's. And then, as I would check back every once in a while, there would be more online. Yeah. And then I went to see if I could find one to show you Friday. So let me see if I can find one of these to show Miles what I'm talking about here. I type her name into the computer, and lo and behold, everything that she worked on for those 3 years has now been bound up into 3 volumes with her name on it as the editor by Connie R. Orendorff. I'm going to say that because I think she should be remembered. And it's all of her work for those 3 years, and it's Middle Eastern this and Oceanic that, and there's a subject, probably a dominant subject for every year, or no, because they've got them out by year, 89, 90, 91, so there must have been a dominant sort of thought process for every year. And it looked, and they were being sold for phenomenal amounts of money. I mean, 140 pounds a volume. So no one's going to be able to buy them and see what's in there, even if there's anything in there that's still worth looking at. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Because they don't release this stuff unless they feel that it's useless to the general public. But if you could buy it, it's an astronomical amount of money that they're charging. So
is that because it's hand bound?
I don't know why it is. I really don't know why it is. But it's the Office of Naval Research who owns her work. If she had published during her lifetime, she'd be in jail. If she had collected up all that stuff and put,
maybe that's why she had the issue.
I don't think so. But I mean, my mother was very careful not to cross any lines and break any rules. She would have, of course. I don't pretend to know everything about her. Believe me, I don't. But it would stun me if she had broken any rules. That really would. And that was, I think, primarily because of her. The only thing she had that could be used against her was me and my little brother. And she loved us very much. So I doubt if she would have crossed anybody and put us in harm's way. So, but I think what's going on here is a technique that the Tavistock Institute uses. Simon Parks talked about this. He said the spell doesn't work unless they tell you what they're gonna do to you. I've always had this theory that you can't lie unless you park the truth someplace. The lie, you can spread the lie, but it's not going to work unless you park the truth somewhere. There has to be that, there has to be that balance. So there's that.
Do you want to talk very briefly about Simon Parks?
Well, He's an interesting fellow, that's for sure. I have had some conversations with him, but just in passing, and so I don't know him very well. I was kind of hoping that we would be on the same panel together at some point, and I still hope that will turn out. I know that
Well, you were going to be in the same panel, but
we were going to be in the same panel, but then he seems to know some things up that he doesn't want to talk about, and he and I are not friends, so I don't know about it. What do you want to talk about?
You want to
Parks?
talk about that? What did you refer about that in the last half
Well,
hour?
I can only say,
Something news happened.
yeah, something new's going on. He's uncontactable for the most part, according to most people right now. Although I did just see an interview with him that was done by my friend Joe Conrad, in Whidbey, I suppose.
Where can people see that?
Oh, you can see it on my magazine, Vortex. Posted it there, but Joe Conrad has it in English on his channel, which is German. Bewusst, BEWUSST TV. Is it dash TV? Something like that. Type in Joe Conrad and...
It'll be .tv.
Yeah. Joe Conrad, which is J-O, and Simon Parks, and it should come up. You should be able to grab it off the internet. But anyway, he did say that there were what he said was, and I hope he's okay with me saying this, but there were other entities at work right now, non-manted entities, and something was going on, particularly in Canada, that had attracted the attention of NASA and the CIA. End of communication. I don't know what it means, but that's...
Well, Canada's a big
message.
place.
Canada's a big place. I don't know. I hope everything's okay. That's all I can say. But yeah, I hadn't been able to get in touch with him, and then that's the message I got.
Okay, well, that was interesting about Simon. Okay, I just thought I'd just push that in there. So
what were we talking about, though? Oh, folk souls, yeah?
folk souls.
Yeah, okay, so one of the reasons that
How do you spell that? Folk.
FOLK SOULS,
Oh, right.
folk souls. One of the reasons that they're pounding the United States as hard as they are is because we are 50 sovereign nations, and sovereignty, individualism, is the folk soul of the United States.
Now, who is they?
They, the predator. I just have to say the predator.
Yeah, I think it's
got to
better.
be-
I think
yeah.
we've got to be aware that there is this predator.
Yeah, they is a stupid thing to say, there's no question, because it's always begs the question, who is they? Yeah, but the predator, and that's what I call it, the predator. I guess it remains to be seen who the predator actually is still. We probably all have our ideas.
Well, one of my interviewees, a guy called Chris Thomas, who has this term called the Velon, a different energetic species from a universe far, far away, and they came across here, and this is very similar to where they would be able to inhabit. So essentially, they're de-inhabiting us.
Yeah, interesting. Well, the one thing you have to ask yourselves is, if we have a predator who's strictly consuming, then why aren't they just consuming us, getting it over with, and wrecking the planet, and getting, but there seems to be some other agenda going on, and this is why I contend that there's someone who wants to use humanity to operate the morphogenic field.
Yes, absolutely.
That's the only thing. I mean, this is the prize. This is the prize. So that I don't know how people might bring up the question, well, how does that work with this idea of ascension, or, rising to access the rest of you? How does it work with that? I don't know.
As Max Spears was referring to, if you can see them, they're not the people in charge.
There you go. Yes, I did think that was a brilliant thing to say. I did see that interview, and it was brilliant.
That would has a lot of implications.
Yeah, exactly.
So that is why they need us on this side of the divide to operate the pulls and pulleys and levers.
I am actually tending to think it's intradimensional, interdimensional, intradimensional. I think there's probably a slight difference between those two things. Intradimensional is, in my opinion, those entities who have some ancient connection with the earth anyway, I would say. Interdimensional, I have no doubt that there are other entities that can come from God knows how far away, really, if you were looking at miles and inches and material space, but interdimensionally can travel. Yeah. but they're not connected to the earth.
Well, there's two terms, off-world and off-planet. And one's meant to be a physical domain close by, and the other is dimensionally.
Yeah. So so these are the little bits, of the walls of our prison. Yeah, these are the little bits that we have to start taking down. And as I've gone through all of this, getting to this is the result of my mother's, in my opinion, sacrifice. When my mother was mown down in that crosswalk, okay, that's the yield, and I think it's tremendous. I will forever be in her debt for that. I have seen, Miles, and this is a non sequitur to a certain extent, but if you think when you think that you can't influence what's going on in the world, somebody showed me a video not too long ago. There are these demonstrations going on in Germany on Mondays called the Monday meetings. Have you seen these?
No.
Well, they're going on all over Germany. Every Monday, people are getting together to do almost like a Hyde Park corner kind of, yeah, and theoretically speak their mind in a free way. And somebody sent me a video of this fellow up in this place called Rostock, which is in northern Germany, and it's a shipping town. And it was getting dark. It was winter. Rain was starting to come down. He was standing under an umbrella, and he was talking to who knows how many people, 10, 50, who knows, right? Because you could only see him. He was being filmed. And this particular book has been translated into German because the Germans are crazy about this information. They're actually getting this information. This one is being translated. I'm having a harder time getting this finished. I think there's a bit of a spell being cast.
No, but you got the first one through, you won't be allowed to get the second one through.
Yeah, see, so this one, though, this fellow is standing under this umbrella. It's getting dark. So he opens the book. He says, "You have to hear this." And he starts to read. Talk about a weepy moment for me. I thought, yeah, there you go, Mom. There you are. You know? So it's a kind of a non sequitur, but it's one of those things where I bring that up because people think that people don't understand this ripple effect of what they're doing and how that goes out. It may seem like nothing, but I had a professor who used to say to me, look, a single drop of water in the ocean may seem like nothing, but if it's a bit warmer than the ocean, it will change the whole ocean, even if it's to an infinitesimal degree.
Well, the butterfly effect, as they said in the 60s.
Yeah,
Was
yeah.
it in the 60s or 70s?
Yeah, that's chaos theory, yeah. So schools, I have decided, turning off my TV and then jumping on this idea of getting our children out of school prison.
Well, that's what a lot of kids are doing. They're getting rid of the TV, but they're also getting into the video game.
Yeah, you have to give them something to do instead. That's the thing. They have no point of reference at this point. Even though, and there are a couple of things I can say about this, because like I said, I do teach. I have a master's in Steiner education, and I practice that. So a couple of things that I can say about that. First of all, you had Mary Rodwell at last year's conference, and she talked about learning disabilities being protections for the children who are coming in, and I believe that's absolutely the case. If you think about it, we can't get the schools to stop punishing the children can protect themselves in some way.
Well, there's a common purpose issue about how to make sure
common
they're kept.
purpose and common core in the United States, it's the most abusive thing that's ever been done to children. But Mary Rodwell's right. They're coming in with physiological configurations in an attempt to protect themselves from what's being done to them. That's number one. We have to embrace that. Number two, they are coming in right now to change things. It is their mission. It is their destiny. I used to say, and I've said this before, I try to be very careful about how I talk about these things with my own children. I think it was right after Fukushima that I brought it up with my oldest son, because I thought, well, this is Fukushima. We really have to I have to say something about this, but what the hell do I say? So I brought the subject up with him, and his instant reaction was, oh, okay, well, that's it, Mom. We're cooked. It's over. What's the point? Which was a bit too far I didn't really want him to go to that place. I wanted him to say, "Oh well, what are we going to do?" You know. But
The Chernobyl situation is fantastic.
that was
the radiation is all life which is non-human
Yeah.
is flourishing there.
Right, right. So, but they don't know that because they're in school, and then they are not allowed to know any of this. And so I thought, well, maybe I shouldn't be that blunt with the children about some of these things. And then I realized that, these children are affected physically, mentally, emotionally. This is their world. Not only, and not looking at them as victims of the world that they've incarnated in. They're not. They came here to deal with this. This is their battle.
They also have a lot of pre-knowledge.
Yes, this is their battle. We have to support them in this battle and not be afraid. They know. Of course they know. They know all of this. So we just have to get that they're here at as we've read before, at the turning point, at the turning of the tide, to turn the tide.
Yes.
All right? Which is another reason that the predator has tripled, quadrupled, exponentially rolled out its efforts to beat children down, because they know, he knows, the predator knows, that the children who are coming in now mean business. They're not.
That is why
they're not kidding.
our generation right now, must enable that path for them as much as possible.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, I was asked by a small little girl. She must have only been about 4, maybe 5 years old. Her father said, she has a question to ask you, and the question was, she was very, very shy, and she asked, where do we come from? But she only asked that question because she knew that I knew the answer that she knew already. And I said, we're all extraterrestrials, we're all from out there.
Yeah, yeah.
And she knew that.
I know. My oldest son just did the same thing to me.
She hadn't read any books. She's just born with that knowledge.
Right. My eldest son just did the same thing to me. I said, where do you think you're from, Hal? Mom, I'm just an observer, he says to me. And he means that. He may not know exactly what he means when he says that right now, but he's not kidding. Mom, I'm just an observer. So
well,
they
observers change existence.
Mm-hmm. Right, the observation principle, like you can't.
Yeah, the cat.
Schrodinger's cat. That's right. You can't.
The split beam experiment.
Exactly. But they know, so they know. So we have to stop.
But that's exactly where the concept of perception and cognition, the predator is attacking.
Yeah, exactly.
In my opinion.
Exactly. So this all the sexual predation that's going on right now to fracture the children's minds, that increases exponentially, which we've all known for a very long time. 1 turns into 100, because that's the nature of, not always, by the way, but it's generally the nature of how that works.
The scale of the programming and the scale of adult population matrix programming is just incredibly increasing.
And this sexual predation goes along with the Frankfurt School. It was Georg Lukács who was part of the original Bolshevik Comintern, the Communist International Party, with Lenin, and had it as his job, his task, to participate in the communist Bolshevik overthrow of Hungary, which was a failed attempt, as was the entire Bolshevik revolution. But one of the first things he did was try to introduce sex education into kindergartens in Hungary in 1919. See, 1919 comes up a lot as a very important date. But at that time, Hungary was so Catholic, and that again is and there's that folk soul. And when you're predating the children, see, this is where I think they always run into trouble, because in the end, we always love our children more than we fear our enemy. It may take forever, it seems, for us to get, because the game is ongoing, and they're always applying pressure here, applying pressure there, changing their tactics. Can we do an end run here? If we just spend the next 50 years applying this pressure in this way, and yet in the end, I think when they come up against whether or not we'll save our children, I think where they end up losing. But right now, the predation of children is thankfully in the news. Now, it's in the news for a couple reasons. One of which is to desensitize us.
Well, there's that, and there's also, I think, one particular agency or broadcaster is trying to get itself off the hook with regard to that.
Yeah. Which one was this?
Oh, the BBC.
Can you say the BBC? Yeah,
I mean, you cannot.
By throwing the blame around, you mean?
Yeah, the scale of how their key broadcasters and key people they had on screen positively vetted over 40 to 50 years, and the scale of how that has had. If they didn't know that was going on, they must be deeply involved.
Right. Of course, they're deeply involved. But this is kind of that double-edged sword. It's one of the psyops they run on us, on us all the time. They did it with desensitization to violence with children. They're doing this now so much that even though we absolutely should know about it and be absolutely horrified by the numbers and what's going on, we're also becoming desensitized to it. So you have to understand that if you're talking about this constantly looking at it.
I recognize that you're actually bringing into being.
Yes, be very careful.
A very double-edged sword, that's I agree.
It is. You have to know about it. We have to be willing to stop it. We have to be willing to look at it. But if you're drowning in it, be careful something else isn't going on.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's an important point that you raise about the BBC trying to, throwing all of that out there, trying to deflect blame.
I mean, I think when the BBC have children in need charity raising, they must be trying to balance their karma on one level.
Yeah.
But that's that's enough attention given to that.
Okay.
Okay. Finally.
What else?
What's your actual feeling about what's happening with the information you've gained recently?
Specify. What do you mean?
The other predator. Where do you mean by this predator? Where do you feel that is?
I've identified the predator.
So a lot of people don't even recognize we have one, but you do.
I think it's intra.
What led you to find that out?
What led me to believe that we had? Well, it had to be a predator. I think it was just spending the last several years reading the work of other people when they talk about potentially humans being farmed as food and those sorts of things.
What kind of food? Soul harvesting.
Well, there's energy. There's energy harvesting for one thing, which is what I'm convinced. If you look around, you see football stadiums filled with people.
Yes.
That's just a giant energy harvester, guys.
Absolutely.
That's all that is.
Yeah, absolutely. And the same with rock concerts.
Same with rock concerts. This is why it came. When you wend your way through lots and lots of evidence, what kind of predation is underway, if you understand the human being as energy, if you come to that understanding finally, if you understand that we're looking at the morphogenic field, that everything is energy. One of the things that I started to do recently is if you decide, and you should, that everything around you is to be questioned, and I mean thoroughly questioned. Everything. Is this table even here? Everything they've said to us is false. Everything is false. So I think you have to start from a couple of places. You have to start from a hook. For me, I started to think about things like what actually is sustenance? One would think of food and water based on what we've been led to believe that we need. And I mean that, what we've been led to believe that we need. Food and water. I stopped practicing carnism, which really helped me. Do you see what I'm saying? This idea of not wanting to participate in the blood sacrifices that are going on this planet. And a lot of that is killing animals and eating animals and people being addicted to adrenalized meat. And, that's not natural. It's not natural.
Yeah, I mean, that's why they traumatize.
It's trauma. It's constant, unrelenting trauma.
The bullfight.
So pulling yourself out, and understanding that really what we're talking about here is energy. And then having having a relationship with this idea of we need to think about what really is sustenance. We're told that we eat. We're told that we eat plants. We're told that we eat pigs. We're told that we drink water. We're told that we have, this is a consumption. This is our consumption. We consume in this way, and we have to consume to stay alive. But since I believe that this construct is completely false, I think that kind of thinking is a good place to start. Is that true? I don't know. And if you ask yourself that, then you have to decide what is sustenance. And when you want to know what is sustenance, what sustains humans, then you're back to energy, aren't you? You're back to frequency. You're back to all of those
everything
things.
is eating something else in this particular world.
It is, but is that natural? That's the question. Is
Well,
that the way it was supposed to be?
The tree, the roots, every bacteria, if somebody's gobbling something else up or transforming it.
Or transforming it,
if you take away the bacteria, the dead bodies just sit there and lie around.
But then the question, I think, then is what are human beings, how are human beings sustained in this environment? These are the questions we need to ask ourselves.
Yes,
I'm not saying I have the answers.
Yeah.
I'm saying, but it really needs to get
cows
that
eat grass,
fundamental.
Other creatures eat other creatures, birds, the predators eat.
And when you get that fundamental, you're really talking about energy. And then there are other people on this planet who are working on the questions of energy harvesting. Yeah? Why do we have these big, coliseums filled with people? If you see them from the air, they look like what they are, which is like giant batteries. And
yes.
Do you know this? And I have friends who are working deeply, and we should all be working deeply on the questions of what are the pyramids? What are they? What, you know what I mean? Are they?
Well, they're all missing their capstones, and the builders of the pyramids have all been killed off. They cannot reincarnate here.
Sorry, I just saw something go up your stairs. Do you have a cat?
No.
Okay.
You saw something go up the stairs.
I did. Sorry.
Pussycat.
I thought it was a cat. Yeah. Anyway, I thought you had a cat. Yes. People who are working on this question of the pyramids and energy generation, and I think so. The original question was, who do I identify, in my opinion, right now as a predator? In my opinion, it's intradimensional. People talk a lot about the jinn. I don't know.
Well, they're native to this planet.
Yeah, I think
we're the recent arrivals.
Yeah.
I think the jinn will be in as much trouble if this planet goes as we are. And they should understand that
and then
very
the question
clearly.
is, do they? That predator thing, do they understand? Or are they just so driven?
Well, perhaps the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
This
That principle.
Yeah, the French way to do algebra, as they say. Did you realize? This is the French way to do algebra. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Yes, so as far as identifying who the predator is, I would have to say that my sense right now is that it is intradimensional. It is an entity that simply cannot. It could be the archons. I mean, are we mixing up the archons and the jinn now, or is that the same?
No, I
same
think
thing?
the archons are possibly humans, allegedly from Mars, who were contaminated by some
the
kind of
archons exist. So,
Again, we don't know enough. We need to look at our ancient database, but that's been raided and destroyed.
We can't do that until we start asking ourselves really what we might consider nutty questions about, like I said, do we eat? Do we drink? This is an artificial construct. What is really going on here?
Well, abductees or contactees would report that they didn't need to eat. They don't need to sleep anymore.
Right.
It was a lot of them. That's one of the signatures of a real abduction.
Yeah.
Or contact. It's that they just don't need to eat or sleep.
Exactly.
They get a higher amount of energy.
It is an elevation to a higher consciousness, and it's.
But in the meantime, if you don't eat, you.
In the meantime, we're in a belief system. In the meantime, we are in a belief system, and belief systems can end your physicality if you don't. If you're really, really hooked into that belief system. So I'm not advocating anything that might interfere with your belief system such that it ends your physical reality. I think it's an
we have a body, it's got a whole lot of things in it which are there to consume energy and food in exchange.
Well, people will say that the human body is a filter.
Well, that's one way of doing it.
There are people who say the human body is a filter, and that we don't need much of this. This business would, if we let it, it would just shrink, and our bodies would filter. And there are people who say that 8 glasses of water a day. We produce 8 glasses of saliva every day. So, do you know? I mean, there are other ways to think about all of these things. Thinking about them in different ways is useful. That's all.
Yes.
Just thinking about things in different ways is very useful. It's not advocacy. I just want to say that.
Just we close Basis 45. What's your number one thing you want to get across? What's your concluding
that's
thought?
easy. That's easy. The imagination. Okay. Our left and right brains are meant to be talking to each other. All right. Our left and right brains stopped talking to each other when the industrialists got into the mix, and they compartmentalized everything that we were doing, and they turned us into cogs and wheels in factories. And we lost the ability to consciously be in the context of anything that we were doing. And that took away all our power to advocate for ourselves, because if you don't have context, what can you argue? You can't argue anything because you have no fodder to argue with. You only have the fact that you can turn that screw 57 seconds out of every 60, okay? Remember that. And that 57 seconds out of every 60 is what started to sever the connection between the right and the left brain.
And then the masculine and the feminine.
Indeed,
I mean, the feminine was so heavily wiped out,
and so is
by
the masculine.
some kind of predator 2,000 years ago or more.
Right. Well, this is the Venus return. This is their back. This is Isis, Venus, Sophia. This is all of that, and it started June 4th, 2012, I think. 2012 was it, or 2010? Anyway, it was 2012. The return, Isis, the return of Venus. The Venus return on June 4th, 2012 was very important. It started this feminine, sacred feminine empowering again. And that is only growing. And frankly, the sacred masculine we've got to get.
Well, men can't be masculine anymore.
I was going to say the boogeyman. Let's get that off our backs, okay? When I talk about the sacred masculine, I almost look over my shoulder, Miles, because I'm a woman who was raised in 20th century, very much 20th century America. So I was taught that the white male was the problem. Yes? Feminism, right? So if I talk about the sacred masculine, the first time that came out of my mouth, I almost did that, because I thought, I'm going to be in trouble here in a minute if I keep, empowering this idea of the sacred masculine. So how about just the sacred human being? But yes, we should recognize, but you're right though, let's recognize the male and the female, because that's another thing that they're trying to...
It's the balance.
They're trying to blend that so we don't... Have you noticed that?
Yeah.
That's what that transgender push is about, to blur those lines completely.
You buy your next baby in a shop, in a test tube.
I don't want to talk about baby. I mean,
yeah,
that stuff. We can talk again sometime about that.
That's a huge
for hours.
thing.
Yep,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks
for coming down. And it's a sunny day.
It's beautiful.
And we're not in an English country garden today because it's a bit windy.
Yes.
But thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Miles.
Blessings. If people want to get hold of you, Cara.
Well, there are a couple of ways. First of all, if you would like me to interview or speak, contact me at whitelionpress@yahoo.com. And also, I have a magazine online. It's called, you can get there by going to www.vortexcourage.me. And also, I have to say this, I should have said this to you before, but my books in Dangerous Imagination, especially in Canada and Australia and New Zealand, were only being offered through Skype. Because Skype is easy to change. Print is not. So, I don't know why Amazon was doing that. I don't care. I took them out of Skype, and I set up a Shopify channel, which I would be happy to send you the list for that as well. Shopify, what is it?
You can email it.
Yeah, Indie, INDIE dash kitchen. Is it at myshopify.com or dot? I think it's at. Well, anyway, yes, I can email that back to you. And I'm selling the print books to the non-United States English-speaking countries that way, because Amazon only wants this material in Kindle, and this material in Kindle is changeable.
That's Kindle and not Skype. So you said Skype.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, Kindle.
Yeah. Well, that's the whole point of Kindle. But then we're out of time.
Yep.
Blessings and thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I hope you like it.